Well, this time of year, like, I always get winter blues. I know it's a term that gets bandied about quite a bit. But I was reading recently that apparently it is a thing. It's been diagnosed as something which people suffer from. But I mean, before I never really took it seriously. I didn't really think it's something that people can actually kind of contract.
So what happens to you when you get into winter blues?
Well, it's nothing major really. I just find I have less energy. I've got less motivation to go to the gym after work. It's harder to get up in the morning. And I think as well there's probably just more awareness around it now because there's just more awareness around mental health generally. Apparently suicide is the biggest killer of men below the age of 45 in the UK. So I think men below the age of 45 account for something like 75% of all suicides in the UK, which is pretty scary.
Why do you think there's more men than women?
Well, I think it goes without saying that women have the freedom to express themselves emotionally. I wouldn't say that women are necessarily the more emotional creatures, but I think they have more freedom to express themselves emotionally. And I think as a result of men being told from a young age to kind of bottle up their emotions, it perhaps means that I don't know.
It's a man up. That's what it is, isn't it?
Well, exactly. Yeah. That phrase in itself tells you a lot about how men are told to kind of deal with their emotions. They're essentially told to bottle them up, and what that means is a lot of feelings that are repressed and come out. I recently came across this. I think they're an organisation called Hip Hop Psyche.
Right.
I don't recall whether they're based in the States or the UK, but they've sort of their primary aim basically is to sort of help people to use hip hop to sort of overcome mental health.
I think I saw a report through them where they reported that the University of Cambridge did a study that evaluated the fact that hip hop can improve depression.
Oh right, okay.
Can help with depression, and they said that when their subjects were listening to hip hop during their depressive states, that they found their mood significantly improve.
I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, but I was really shocked when, I say really shocked actually, the guy's bloody mental, but when Kanye West was incarcerated for when he had that episode during his St. Pablo tour.
Oh yeah.
Because I kind
he
of
went crazy on the stage, like ranting, and then next day he's in the hospital.
Because I kind of thought he was on the fringe of psychosis, paranoia, but when I read that, I was quite shocked that it was covered, in mainstream press in the way that it was, because you don't really. I felt like up to that point there wasn't really much of a discussion around, sort of rappers and mental health, just because it's all about, kind of, giving off this kind of rough and tough image.
I think that's the first time when it was reported that he was going through mental health issues, the first time the press gave him benefit of the doubt of it. Yeah. Usually the press were all over him, loving the fact that he's going a bit off the rails.
Yeah.
But for the first time, because he was actually in hospital for it, and it was diagnosed as something to do with his mind, for the first time people started to sympathise with him.
Yeah.
I think that's not looked at as much, that a lot of artists, especially creative artists, to be that creative and be that original, you have to go through a lot.
Oh yeah.
And that's not really highlighted as much. What artists go through for them to give us that creativity and give us that art that they produce. And what you just said just now about going back into hip hop.
Yeah.
You're right. Like, look at people back in the day. Like, look at DMX.
Wow. Yeah.
Look how
he's been diagnosed with bipolar, hasn't he?
Yeah. You could see it from our way, regardless. But we don't take it as serious, because to us, they're just on the TV. Yeah. They're just they're there to entertain us. We don't really see the facts that they're going through so many hardships, and they're sharing with us. They're sharing their story with us.
Yeah. And
I think in hip hop, that's something that's quite unique to hip hop.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think, you would assume that hip hop is kind of a breeding ground for mental health problems, just for the simple fact that a lot of the artists that go on to become rappers, a lot of them are born into single parent households. They're kind of born into a life of crime. They're exposed to situations which might cause them to turn inwards, to bottle up emotions, maybe to get in with the right gang, or to give off this image of being this tough guy. That doesn't really lend itself to being open and emotional about who you are. And I think that's one thing that really sort of drew me to Tupac, because I felt a lot of his strength came through his outward vulnerability. On the one hand, he gives the impression of being this gangster, but then he released a lot of tracks which show soft side, like Keep Your Head Up, So Many Tears. There's definitely
I Ain't Mad At Ya.
I Ain't Mad At Ya is a perfect example. Yeah. There's forgiveness and acceptance in there. Very.
And he's writing to someone in such a sentimental way.
Yeah.
He's writing to a man in a sentimental way. I think the reason why that impacts me more than any other sort of song that comes from another genre is because you can hear lyrics. He's actually being so truthful with it.
Yeah.
He didn't write that thinking, oh yeah, that sort of person will like this song.
Yeah.
He didn't write that because he thought, that will be catchy.
Yeah.
He wrote it because it's something that he really felt. And I can apply that emotion to what I'm going through. Have you ever had a track like that?
There's a lot. I'd say one of the tracks it's one of the first hip hop tunes I got into that really kind of empowered me. It was Me Against the World.
Oh yeah.
And I think the reason why I single out that track is because it really does capture a feeling you have when you're a teenager, of being able to take on the world, of being able to accomplish anything.
How old were you when you first heard that?
Do you know what? I first came across that on the Bad Boy soundtrack, because I bought the album. So I love the
Was that on Bad Boys, the first one?
The first one, yeah, it's in the album. And there's one, it's the outro to that tune that I really like, and it's he goes something like, through every dark day, there's a bright day after that, so keep your head up, put your chest out and handle it, something like that. And I heard that and I was like, there's just something really empowering about that. But I always think, sort of conversations like that, they always come from a dark place.
Yeah.
For someone to put out a message like that, they're clearly trying to kind of overcome something themselves.
Yeah. That's it. I think there's an example of that. A lot of hip hop songs from that era, from the 90s.
Yeah.
You think about the amount of discrimination that went on in the 90s to different ethnic groups and different social movements. Hip hop provided a soundtrack for that.
Yeah.
And I think that these guys were from really poor backgrounds. They weren't getting support from authorities. They couldn't get jobs. Yeah, they found a art form to express themselves in.
Yeah. Do you get a sense in which, certainly during the 90s, that a lot of the talk of, struggling and strife were kind of almost sort of, do you get this sense in which that they were almost like preempting their fate? Like, for example, you could take Tupac, let's say, and he spoke a lot about suicide, to the point where even in videos you had him in, all white, as a ghost, yeah, exactly. And there's almost a sense in which we weren't listening to the messages being put out. We were just appreciating them for their artistry, but not for the messages that were kind of being given. I mean, even ODB. I mean, come on, there was definitely something wrong with him. You just watch some of his interviews. He just goes off on these crazy tangents. He died from a drug overdose. I wonder whether there was something wrong with him, and that was just covered up.
Well, they said even ODB, they said that there's reports that he was actually diagnosed with mental disorder.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll say really. I'm not. That doesn't surprise me.
But it makes me realise that even though ODB was diagnosed with a mental disorder, he still made sense more than most rappers these days.
That's true.
You compare ODB,
madness.
He said, and he said an excuse. If you look at people like Young Thug these days and stuff, they can't hear once in the word that they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. ODB was making quality music with a message, And even when it wasn't a good message, you still created a feeling of creativity and a feeling of entertainment.
Yeah.
But your point about rappers, do they sort of predetermine their fate with what the lyrics are going to say?
Yeah.
I think the reason why they were so good, that Pac and Biggie talked about dying a lot, Ready to Die, Life After Death, Suicidal Thoughts, isn't. I don't think it predetermines their death. It's the fact that to be that out there and to be that outspoken and really believe in yourself, I don't think they feared death.
You have to live they had to live life on the edge.
Yeah, they lived it. They had a message, and if you look at Pac especially, spoke out against the government, spoke about record labels.
Yeah.
He spoke out against police. He was affiliated with.
He was putting himself in the fire, remember?
Exactly, yeah. Especially towards the end, he was affiliated with the Bloods and stuff like that. He had beef with the Crips, well, not him personally, but shooting that and all that. Like, I think he was prepared for it. He knew to live that life. You had to really expect death. Yeah. Because you had to, if you said put yourself on the firing line, you had to put your heart on the sleeve, basically. Yeah. So I think that's why. But and then they prepared for that risk.
Yeah, that's true.
But the reason why they thought about death and about that must be because they probably went through suicidal thoughts. They probably went through really bad depressive states where they thought about that they were going to die. They thought they would, I want to end it now. Yeah. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And look how strong these men were before they died. Yeah. Especially Pac got shot 5 times. So he must have expected death. It's coming for him.
I think also part of the celebration of being suicidal and just living and contemplating death, I think there's a feeling of martyrdom in it as well. It's like if you're approaching death and you're embracing it almost kind of validates your position as a get rich or die trying artist. So I think there's almost like a weird sort of martyrdom in that of I'm not afraid to die.
I don't think they are afraid to die. Like even again 50 Cent, he got shot 9 times. Yeah. So I think the feeling that look they should be dead by now. Yeah. But they've got nothing else to fear now. They almost
immortalise them somehow.
Exactly. If they were already supposed to die, what else have they got to fear? Yeah. They're on their deathbed. They're on their deathbeds. Yeah. They're in hospital beds, and they survived.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting artists who's really gone through a lot in their life, but I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, is LL Cool J. Now this is a guy that you would by no means look at as being an artist with issues or hang up to has ever really come across as being very aggressive or very sort of he's never really come across as being that gun-toting rapper. But there's apparently a story behind why he always has a hat on. Right. And apparently the story goes that he grew up in a very difficult household. I think someone in his family, I can't recall who exactly, but there was some altercation with guns. Someone was shot. I think someone may have died in the process. And he was certainly in the presence of someone that mistreated him. But what's interesting is he went in a completely different direction, and he put out a lot of music about love and companion. It's almost like he's gone in the opposite direction, and he's tried to give out a counter message to the sort of life that he was exposed to in his own household. But apparently that's part of the reason why he always wears a hat, and almost that in itself is kind of a covering up. Him kind of hiding away his. Eminem's another great example. You could say that his best material was put out when he was having marital problems, or he was suffering from sleep deprivation, and that came at the apex of Marshall Mathers and all that stuff. That was clearly coming from a very dark place.
Yeah. And even Eminem, though, you can, like you said about Cool J, he played a lot of positive, not songs about love. Eminem made a lot of comedic songs that were quite controversial. Yeah. Like some of his best hits were those comedic songs that weren't about such a sad undertone. Yeah. Even the ones that were a bit more serious or a bit more hard hitting. Yeah. They weren't so depressive. Like if you look at, for example. What's the main one that from the Guilty Conscience, for example? Guilty Conscience. it's quite sadistic in a way,
Yeah.
but he's making light of it.
Yeah,
The song's all about good and bad,
Yeah.
the devil and angel, and he's making it into sort of humorous way.
Well, I think people have different coping mechanisms. You know, some people laugh off problems, and I think he did kind of a mixture of things. You know, because a lot of his songs are quite absurd. I think even back then when he was going through what he was, and even with a lot of the problems that DMX was having, there still wasn't quite the dialogue in mainstream news that you have now. Like when Kid Cudi came out, was it October, about suffering from mental health problems? I mean that hit kind of mainstream news, and then other such, I think Kendrick has since come forward as having kind of problems as well. I think looking at the UK scene, I think one artist is sort of up and coming at the moment that has really been very expressive in their own personal crisis is Loyal Kana, who obviously I saw over the summer.
You look a bit like him, by the way.
Oh, you're not the first person to say that. I don't really know how to take that. He's like not half my age.
You can pretend you're him.
He's a lot younger than me. Yeah, should be. But what's quite interesting is his music is littered with feelings of emotion and introspection. I think his own dad died when he was quite young, and he released a tune called, I think it's called either Eric or Cantona, and obviously it's a reference to the footballer Eric Cantona. But the story goes that his dad was a massive Man U fan back in the day, and when his dad died, he held on to Cantona jersey as a memory of him, and that's why he wrote that song about it, because in that jersey, that sort of jersey is kind of a sort of a living embodiment of his dad's memory.
Right. That's mad.
Yeah, and that's quite. And he's very frank about the meaning behind that song. And when I went to see him over the summer, there was an incident where someone collapsed in the audience, and they had a fit. And he basically used that. No, you would think, okay, you went to a gig that something happened, that you would assume that the gig would get closed down, the venue would, if the show would stop and people would get thrown out. He actually did a really good thing and asked people to give the guy some space. And he used that situation to explain that his dad had died from, I think it was either epilepsy or from a fit. And he harnessed that for good. The show went on, people showed the boy some support as he was taken out on a stretcher, and in that single moment I thought, okay, this is a sort of a negative situation has happened, and hip hop has done good by it.
Yeah, I think to your point about hip hop bringing awareness to problems, and that could create even more of a downward spiral, in a sense. If you look at Capital Steez, he was exposed to a lot of knowledge, and he was contemplating it so much and started to talk about the world's problems, and he struggled to really, I feel he struggled to really cope with that, because he's 19 and he's exposed to so much information and going through all these different thoughts that unfortunately it all boiled up on him, and he felt that he had to escape from it all, and that's why he ended his life. I know there's a lot of conspiracies to what really happened to that, but we don't really know what happened. But I can empathise in the sense of when you hear about a lot of things that are going on in the world and apply it to yourself, it can really get you down, and it puts you in a bad way. But there's a solution to it, because you know this information, and so now Capital Steez tried to do it. He tried to spit, which he has done. He put it into music, and now he's put positive into it, since we can hear that music, and it helps someone else. It's helped someone. So I think if you are exposed to a feeling or exposed to information, it's important to share it. Because the more you share things, the more that you don't only get off your own chest, but you've helped someone else at the same time. I feel that hip hop will be a good tool for saving a lot of people that are in a bad way, in their minds. What about you? How do you feel the direction hip hop will go to?
Well, I think because there's a lot more talk about hip hop and mental health in mainstream media. you would like to think that it would move in a slightly different direction. You'd like to think that more artists would come out about problems that they're having, and perhaps that may slightly change the message. But I don't know if I can see it happening in the immediate future. I think what will probably happen is you'll see more organisations like Hip Hop Psyche spring up, and more workshops which sort of give people an opportunity to use music to deal with their any problems they might be having. But I think it will be a long time before you see those messages coming through in mainstream media, in mainstream music. Do you want another coffee?
No, I'm alright, mate. I'm alright.